Hey, look who's back once again. Hey, let me see a bit of water before we're going to start, and boom! Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Live to Learn, Learn to Live channel. So, yes, I did say that I would have brought you into the scene, into the action, into more visuals of whatever happened, but I realized that a lot of you were actually enjoying the multitasking function of these videos that were also functioning as a sort of podcast. So I decided to keep on using this narrative process so that some of you can listen and some others that want to also to watch can watch and listen. Right now, I'm 28 years old and I'm about to come back to the motherland, to Ghana, in order to walk on this new path of self-sustainability and also of organized programs that would attract people from the West in order to learn the ancient way, in order to embrace a way of living that can be balanced with our Mother Earth. I did all that I needed to do in the West. I closed all the chapters that I needed to close, and it was time for me to fully immerse myself into this new realm. So here we are at the beginning of 2020. 6 months has passed since I left Ghana, and it was time for me finally to come back. The first thing I needed to do was to go and say hi to Auntie Emma. During this 6 months, I got in touch with her only once. I managed to have a phone call. Apart from that, we haven't been in touch as much. So I didn't tell her that I was coming back. And here was her reaction. Wow, it was such a joy. It was such a joy. She definitely was surprised and full on of life and support. And the next things I needed to do right now was to go back in the land and see what happened in this half year. So now in this half year, the rainy season kicked in. So of course, a lot of things were most likely changed because the water here, when it comes down for real. As soon as I stepped inside the land, there was the water tank that was looking almost as an ancient ruin. The roof was completely gone. And the hut also was still alive, was still there with some holes on the roof here and there. And then also the toilet was pretty much collapsed. The only thing that stayed quite untouched was the storage room. Indeed, the different type of wood that I use proved itself to be indeed stronger. The whole job needed to start all over from zero. Whatever I did was actually need to be done all over again. So a new challenge was ahead, and I was definitely ready to embrace it all. I was moving in. This time I definitely had a big support, a big physical support with me, which was the bell tent. This time I knew which environment I was going to, with the sandflies, with the heat, with the various resources that were around. So I brought with me a bell tent, and the bell tent was maybe the thing that helped me the most in this initial stage in order to create the whole place, in order to accommodate people once again more on a sort of regular basis. I pitched the bell tent, didn't take long, and I made a very nice, cozy environment for myself that was protected from the environment, but in the meantime very much surrounded by it. And straight after the bell tent was done, it was time for me to start working in order to put the place together. And also the accommodation for the guests would be another bell tent that actually was even bigger than the one that I had. About 9 people could have slept on the bell tent. It was like a 5 diameter big bell tent. So ideally I wanted to build a toilet for myself and the guests, a kitchen for myself and the guests, a shower also for myself and the guests, and also a dining hall that would have functioned as a dining hall indeed, and also especially a place where we could have sit, chill and share. I already gained a lot of knowledge from previous experiences, so I was going a bit more confident this time, especially in connection to the local environment. So the one person that I didn't mention as yet is Ora Kweku, also known as Oraku, but you might know it simply as Ora. Ora is Auntie Emma's grandson, and also when I first came here, he came in the land a few times to help me to manage my water situation when the rain was not coming. After school, Ora was coming back and bringing me food from Auntie Emma herself. Also, he was coming with Kwame, also known as Ole, his best friend. And after school, they were coming, bringing the food. We were eating together, chilling together, at times also working together so they could learn also new things that because of their tender age, they were not as exposed to as yet. Especially myself, I always wanted to do things in particular ways, so they were not necessarily done around this area. So also for them, I believe was a nice way also to open up to new possibility of doing things, of of building things and of creating stuff. And the way I was living was definitely something very new to them, even though it was the same way that our ancestors used to live like. But of course, due to colonization and westernization, a life in full connection to nature, submerged completely by the realm of nature, was something quite rare, even in the most Ghanaian rural areas. But to meet somebody that for them was just coming from the West, willing to live this life, I believe was also very much an eye-opening experience for themselves. The work of the building kept on going. Every now and then, as I mentioned, Ora, Olde were coming, but also Ski. Ski was the motor rider that was often dropping me up and down in case he was available. By some point, the work at the motor station was not that fine, so he was coming here in order to get some extra money, in order to get some extra income, and also in order to have some extra vibe. In the meantime, also through my Instagram page, people started to be interested about what I was doing, and so some people just came just to visit, some sort of volunteering vibe. It was a whole dance, was a whole vibe. It was a very beautiful exchange that took place in these circumstances altogether. The building process took about 1 month. It was a 1 month of full-on work that it never stopped for me. I was waking up, working, going to sleep, working. And so after a full-on month of sweat, dances and exchanges and work and hard work, I managed to build the whole structure that was needed in order to accommodate myself and whoever was willing to come and stay. So the toilet was done. It was a nice, cozy toilet with a bucket system, a compost toilet. Sodas would have been used in order to cover the smell and eventually to help the composting process. This was covered by the Kente print that reminds us the ancient patterns of the Akan. Also, the shower was finished. It was a nice shower. It was an open shower on top of a platform. The water would have been recycled and then used again in order to water in the plant during the dry season. And also managed to build a beautiful kitchen that I like to call Auntie Emma's kitchen. You eat, you feel, as she would like to say. It was a nice, open, cozy kitchen as well, cooking with fire and so on. And then also the hall, what I like to call a Siedu hall. You sit, you learn. So the hall also was ready, also covered by Kente in order to bring the mind back to the ancient wisdom of the Akan. Overall, it was a very, very beautiful process that took only a month, relatively only a month. Here, time works in a very different way. Like a day here can easily feel like a week or 2 weeks. And 2 weeks in the meantime might feel like an hour. I don't know to put it down in words, but it's really like that. So yeah, I was ready to host people. I was ready to welcome people. I already programmed 2 retreats, as I used to call them before. Each of them was lasting for 7 days with various activities as pottery, herbal medicine, palm wine, workshops, and much more. But happened that Auntie Rona was in the building, so the whole world was shut down. I already had a couple of people that booked, and but I needed to refund everything. It couldn't take place. All the hard work eventually couldn't really take its full expression because it couldn't be shared, but I was definitely enjoying it myself. As the structure was finished, boom, I got sick. For the first time, I got like properly sick. And I'm not sure what it was. It felt like a food poisoning. Definitely my stomach was incredibly upset, to the point that got my immune system so weak that I was having high fever and a huge amount of weakness around, and I could feel it in my bones. It was certainly no Auntie Rona. It was nothing like runny nose, coughing, or whatever like that. Auntie Emma suspected malaria. The symptom was very close to malaria, but I didn't feel that agony that made me associated to it. So if it was malaria, it was definitely in its initial stage and very mild version of malaria. But I was surely incredibly weak. So Auntie Emma asked me to go to her place and to get treated with herbs from herself. And that experience was also very, very beautiful. To get treated from the local herbs here for the first time in order to heal properly from A to Z, from 0 to 100 was such a also very empowering experience. I must say Ora also played its role. Of course, Ora lived with Auntie Emma and always being there for whatever was needed. Within a few days, I recovered almost 100%, and the fever was gone, the weakness was gone, but the stomach was still very much upset. And Auntie Emma was keep on dropping food, like forcing me to eat whatever was just in front of my face. It was too much. At some point, I could feel that I actually needed to literally start fasting. But Auntie Emma has a lot of beautiful knowledge, ancient knowledge about herbs, yet fasting also connected to the Ghanaian culture is something that doesn't exist. We don't fast. So, but I really felt that I needed to take a break from food. And also, I needed to come back into the quietness and the harmony of the land. And I felt that I needed it. And so I followed that intuition. I came back here. I started to fast and to embrace the beautiful rhythm of this reel. And within a few days, literally everything was correct once again. Yeah, my life kept on going in a very smooth and harmonious way. And I remember Ora and Ole were often coming around. We were cooking together, eating together, playing music together, reading together, chilling together, and going fetching water. Was still the dry season, and so water needed to be taken from a close by water well that was not too close, about 1 kilometer away. And so we were doing that together, and then also harvesting some fruits together. Was a whole vibe that definitely allowed me to realize even more there was no better place where to be stuck in, to the point that was like, okay, let's bring it a little bit further. I started to work on the garden. That was very essential for me to find full self-sustainability, not only in sleeping, but also, of course, in eating. That is the main core. So I designed the garden. I designed what to grow, where to grow it. Already had the experience from the previous year that I did some trials and mistakes, and now I had definitely more knowledge in order to implement a more sustainable garden. So I started to plant a bunch of pepper. I started to plant zucchini, also garden eggs, tomatoes, garlic, okra, plantains, and bananas. And then eventually I started to also have my first crops, literally eating those tomatoes fresh from the land. There was something very incredibly empowering that I never really embraced from A to Z on that degree. Definitely Ora and also Ole were very much involved with the farming process, especially with the initial stage of clearing up the area. And I was very proud of them, especially of Ora that was coming more often. That yes, he was going and farming and helping Auntie Emma, her grandmother, when she was going farming, but never on the degree of starting something from zero and also using his own mind. So it was something very beautiful that I had the chance to share with him, and it was very also amazing to witness his growing process through that experience itself. Here, Auntie Rona didn't really take over the whole Ghana, especially the rural areas. We were very much almost relatively untouched by it. There was never such a thing as lockdown, as for example in Accra. There was no even mandatory mask. Our life kept on going. The only thing that I felt is that people couldn't come to the program anymore, and also the school was closed, and church, people couldn't go to church, and also funerals and weddings and various events were placed on hold, which are quite of a big thing here in Ghana, of course. There are whole big parties and big gathering and big celebrations. So, but our daily life kept on going as normally. So Ora was coming, sometimes also with some of his friends. It was kind of natural. We were all chilling here, and I was like, why don't we build a nice playground? Now, one thing that I need to state is that all of these kids, they had their parents that had the same, if not bigger land than whatever I was living. So it's not that they were willing to do something like that because they couldn't do it elsewhere. It just happened that I was vibing with them, they were vibing with me, and so it was just more of a why not. So within this why not, I started to plan where to place the various pitch, the basketball pitch, the volleyball pitch, the soccer pitch, and also the Atentam pitch. Atentam is a wrestling, local wrestling, and was a vibe. Working a lot, but also we were enjoying dancing, always on top of the vibrational rhythm of life. And also I tried my best also to share some talks about colonialism, about European invasion, about Ghanaian resources, and what was the thought of themselves, of the kids, about Ghana, about its opportunities, about its farming, and also themselves sharing with me their technique of farming, or some kids knew how to hunt and they were sharing with me how this takes place here. And so it was a very beautiful, like literally high level exchange. And I think that was maybe the particular way. In my opinion, the youth is not often highlighted. It's very much, you know, you are young, so shut up, and eventually when you become older, you have the right to talk. So me as an elder for them, I was definitely giving a lot of space in order to bring thought and opinions and so on. So I think maybe we just vibed on that. And that one made also smoother the creation of this playground. Then eventually one day we organized a nice tournament all together with also other people that were not necessarily involved with the building, and We were playing volleyball and soccer and basketball. We did a little tournament. Yeah, it was a blessing. It was a blessing. With the rainy season, I could feel that it was not really doable for me to still live in that tent. It was necessary for me to bring it a little bit further. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna build a proper next level house. Built ideally entirely with local natural resources. I didn't want to have an experimental house. I wanted to have something that I knew it would last. Therefore, I seek for somebody that would have known how to build a house with local resources. Unfortunately, among the modern Akan culture, a lot of ancient way of building are kind of lost. Some ethnicity in the north, or for example, the Ewe people in the Volta region, that are definitely much more connected with their ancient way of building, of roofing. Within the Akan, most of it has faded away. But when it comes to the walls, there's still a technique, especially in rural areas, Akan rural areas, that is practiced, generally known as atakwame. Yeah, it's a technique that involves clay and sand, pile it together, and make a layer of wool. As the layer of wool dries up after a couple of weeks, another layer of wool gets built on top until you reach the height that you would like to reach, and then you make the roof on top. Now, about the roof, finding somebody that knew about ancient way of roofing was very, very hard in this area. Modernization and westernization took incredibly violently over the architectural, cultural aspect of the Akan. Most of the people are building with cement blocks. They're covering up the whole building with iron sheets. So to find somebody that was knowledgeable about the local resources that were usable in order to make a roof was very hard. Until I managed to find a man who was Ewe. His name was Damensa. Damensa was an expert in building natural walls, but also in building natural roofs. And he told me that the best roof that could have been built here with the local resources would have been a bamboo roof, or pampron as we would call it here. I was like, okay, I'm gonna build a nice atakwame structure covered by a next level bamboo roof. We talked about a deal, and within this deal, I needed to be deeply involved within the building process. It was me and him building. We had an agreement, and then together we embraced this new chapter of building a whole house. The structure was planned to have 2 rooms and 1 side shower. Another thing that I wanted to do, of course, was to involve some of our friends in the building process, not only for them to gather some money, but also to keep and preserving some knowledge that was clearly fading away in front of our eyes. And so all together, we started to work in order to put the house together. We started to work on the foundation, and then dug the foundation, and then worked with the clay that was abundantly available in the land, and mixing them, making these bowls, send them to the Mensa, and he was placing them correctly. All was going for a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, and then boom, the big rain started to come. This technique works in a way that first you do the wall and then you do the roof. If it would have been vice versa, would be no problem, because the roof is there, and then we can build up the wall that even if it's not waterproof, it can still be covered because of the roof, of course. But in this case, we needed to go with the walls first. And if the rain was dropping, it was melting the whole structure. A little rain could be handled, but that amount of rain was not possible. So we needed to place the whole work on hold. In the meantime, I didn't even know if it was even possible, because the rain was keep on dropping. At some point, I was like, okay, or am I gonna wait for months, or I'm gonna change the way of building. I did few researches while asking around, while checking the various ancient structures that were still around in this place. I discovered that also atakwame can be built in a different way, with a type of wood that is called kindra. The same wood that I used in order to build the storage room could have been used in order to build a whole house, and then attaching the roof on top of it. Then once the roof would have been attached, we would have made a frame around the whole skeleton of the house, and the same frame would have been filled with the same clay that we were using for atakwame. Pretty much it's the same resources, just that more wood is needed, because our skeleton needed to support the roof in the first place. So we opted to go for that. Before the decision of building this way, a few weeks passed, actually a month passed if I remember well, and by then the boys were back to school. So it was just me and Damensa, and together we decided to still, of course, go for it. There were about 100 sticks that needed to be taken. Then Damensa placed all the sticks down, and together we attached all the frame, all the skeleton of the whole house, and the 2 rooms started to take place, the shower spots started to take place, and then it was time for the roof. So the roof process was a whole process. So the bamboo needed to be divided in half and eventually clean it, and then the Mensa was attaching the bamboo. So we were halfway of the veranda, so it's about maybe 1/8 of the whole work. So not that much, but still a lot of hard work already went in. Also quite a lot of money already went in, especially to gather all the bamboos and so on. And a light rain arrived, and the light rain allowed us to realize that the roof was leaking, but like leaking. My heart was a bit like, aish. I remember double checking with the Mensa about the slope of the roof. Generally, if you do an iron sheet roof, you don't need such a slope. Also, almost 0 degrees can work because there's no way the water can go through the iron sheet. But I remind the Mensa that we were not using iron sheet, but we were using bamboo, that even though it's quite of a firm resource, still requires quite of a slope in order to allow the water to run faster and not accumulate in any corners of the bamboo that can create a leaking, especially where the nails is positioned. But the Mensa said that the angle was fine, there was no need of such a slope, and that the problem of the leaking actually was because he placed 2 nails instead of 1. It's a bit of a technical thing, but long story short, he said that 1 nail would have been enough to fix the leaking problem. I was a bit doubting that, but I had no other reference than trusting the Mensa. So I trusted him, and so we kept on going by taking out all the bamboo that we already placed and start placing the new one by attaching it only with 1 nail. At this stage also was quite natural, that felt that the Mensa wanted me, and also myself, I wanted to take over. That the Mensa was not lying when he said that he knew how to work with natural roofing and with bamboo, but maybe he did it a bit too long ago and maybe not too often in order for him to be on top of that game, because the leaking mistake was not a small mistake, it was quite of a principal mistake. So it felt a bit natural from also inside that wanted me to take over, and myself, I was not shining away from this new, let's say, challenge. So I started to go on top of the roof and attaching the bamboo myself. The Mensa at the stage was dividing the bamboo and leaving it for me, and I was going and taking it and placing it all on top. And at the stage, the Mensa started to come a little bit less. I guess he was also getting tired. As an elder person, I understood that. So I was often alone in the game of attaching the whole roof. The bamboo game is very tricky, not only because it's incredibly sharp and I was cutting my hands on a daily basis, but also because it's a bit of a puzzle. Actually, not each bamboo would fit on top of the other bamboo, so you need to find the fit, because a lot of bamboo, especially here, I have in a lot of curves. So it was a puzzle game, was a whole patient game, and also a very hard work game. At the stage, the rain stopped completely, the sun was shining on the daily basis, was hot, 40 plus degrees, and going on top of the roof was literally a whole challenge that of course allowed me to not only learn incredibly a lot through the roughness, but also to grow immensely physically also, and I became way fitter thanks to the circumstances of the work. Day after day, week after week. It took about a month in order to finish up the whole roof. And wow, I remember it was such a satisfaction when I saw all the bamboo on top of it. Hey, the celebration that I had, the rewarding that I had just by knowing that I did it. Just by knowing that with these 2 hands, I managed to put the whole roof of the whole house. It was so empowering, was another incredible, empowering experience that it cannot be forgotten, will be always stay within myself. Once the roof was done, then it was time to fill up with the mud the whole skeleton of the walls in order to create the actual house and protection from the various elements. The mixing process took place again, and the whole mixing, throwing took place, and the Mensa came back a bit more often, until a point that after a month of working, I realized that this job was virtually endless. The house was not necessarily so big, but was definitely a bit too much for the 2 of us. So I definitely needed more workers, but it was so hard to find reliability on those days. It's very much of a cultural thing. Even though I was paying people were still not showing up. Actually, people were approaching me, asking me if I had jobs. I was like, yes, okay, come over, we need help. We had an agreement with money, with timing and everything. Nobody was showing up. It is really much of a cultural thing here. Reliability is very hard to be found, especially in this very area. Yeah, it was very rough until a point I was like, well, there must be a way to gather some people here. I need help. So I went to one of the elder of our village, Ankamankwa, and I exposed him the matter. He said, okay, there's one place where maybe we can seek support. This place is in Monemone. Monemone is still in Mancron, but it's a little bit separated from the village of Mancron. It is pretty much more of an extended family, made mainly by Ewe people that are very much of a more a community vibe together. And so Ankamankwa told me, go and buy 2 bottles of schnapps, and then we will go there and do the official traditional request. So we went there. Ankamankwa is an elder with me. Ankamankwa did the talk and said, hey, my son needs help. He brought you these drinks. And they understood that whoever would have drunk even just a sip from that drink, they would have got the duty to come and help out. So they asked when the day would have been, and I said, tomorrow. What time? 7 o'clock. They were like, okay, we will be there. A bunch of us will come there tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Was not expecting anything in particular, but also was a bit skeptical that people would actually show up. The day after 7 o'clock, nobody was there. No one was there, but then 7:15, nobody was there. But then 7:30, nobody was there. Nobody was there, but at some point, after 7:30, I remember I started hearing some voices. And guess what? My voice came, my people came. I was like so surprised. I was like, no way. There were about 10 people that came over. Achim, Victor, Papa K. Hey, a bunch of people showed up from Monemone, and it was a blessing. It was a blessing together. We dropped some nice music. Of course, also the Akpeteshe must have played its role in order to keep the vibe correct. And then, boom, just dropping the clay. They knew also the work. They knew the work. So with a bunch of us became way faster. And within one day, we almost covered the whole surface of the whole house. And they didn't ask anything in return. The only thing that they wanted was for me to provide the meal of the day, of course. But apart from that, they didn't want the money. And it was so beautiful to see people caring for me here. It's something that was for me very emotional. I remember entering inside one of the rooms that was, by the way, finally a room. See a bunch of people being there for me. And I remember like almost crying. I was like, wow. It was so beautiful to receive that type of care. And it was needed to feel it here in my home in Ghana. Once again, I felt it all around the world. But here, I didn't feel it until this stage, and was very, very needed to go through the human side. That apart from Auntie Emma and her circle, I was not really finding elsewhere. They needed to stay the whole day. They stayed only for a couple of hours. After a couple of hours, they were like, okay, we're going. We're coming back next week. Nobody showed up next week in the end. And this also shows the reality of this environment that, certain things are here, but not too romantic. But I still appreciate so much the help that they dropped. And reliability here is really a thing. And let's not get it wrong. It's not that people didn't come because money were involved, or people didn't come because no money were involved. Regardless what was the deal, good deal, bad deal, awesome deal, huge deal, no deal, human deal, whatever it was, reliability here is very much of a challenging topic. I don't think it can be explained. I think it can only be lived and experienced, because it's something that goes beyond rationalism. And that was my biggest challenge, to navigate through this non-rational way of being, of interacting on finding support from the local community. And definitely that gesture that Ankamankwa did, and that gesture of the people from Monemone definitely opened up many more doors for me to embrace within this cultural context. There's also the beauty, I believe, of a place like rural Ghana. The things simply are. Me and Damesa kept on going for about a week, and then the house was roofed and completely clayed, and part of the job was finished. Not the whole job was finished, but Damesa's job was finished. I also realized that it was such a growing process working with Damesa that in the end, he didn't do it, of course, for the sake of helping. He did it for money, of course, which is understandable. So I didn't really felt that care from his side on a sort of vision level. But in the meantime, I realized, especially in the last stage, how much of an elder figure became for me, and how much I learned just by exchanging with him. I learned more about myself, how I needed to be more chilled, how I needed to be more patient, how I needed to be more laid back, and how I also needed to stand in my ground and talk my truth without letting things flow because people didn't show up or things are a bit too hard to work through. It was a whole process that allowed me to grow a lot. I really give thanks for Damensa and also Israel ability. One thing that Damensa surely showed was Israel ability to always come anytime he was saying I will come. And it's something that I will always appreciate. So also my farewell to Damensa was emotional, and I was so grateful for that experience that I had with him. And now I was left with a house that was of course not finished. The plastering still needed to take place, the flooring still needed to take place, the furniture still needed to be built, and I was going to the last phase of finishing up the house literally by myself. Right before this whole final stage took place, a big rain arrived. From the time that the roof was leaking and we fixed it with one nail, all until this point, the rain didn't drop whatsoever. And once the rain dropped, my heart was truthfully crying. The whole house was leaking. There were maybe, I don't know, 20 to 50 spots that were leaking. Knowing the work that I went through in order to put the roof together, and the leaking was not a little joke, because I was building with natural resources that in this case were not waterproof, meaning that if the water would have been too much in contact with the walls, with the floor, everything would have melted. So it was a major problem that needed to be fixed. I remember that day witnessing the leaking was too much, and I felt instinctively to start going around and to fix the leakage and here and there, but there was nothing I could have done. I just needed to wait for the rain to stop and then just signing up the spot where the leakage was taking place and see eventually what best solution I could have found. I tried to use recycled plastic in order to cover those spots, but was not enough because of the angle of the bamboo and a few different technical stuff. So the only option that I had was or to dismantle the whole roof, which was virtually impossible by now, or to actually cover up with a fabric leather, an artificial leather that would have helped me to really keep the room waterproof. So I opted for that one, even though it was not the most natural look that I wanted, and also because it was inevitably increasing the temperature of the room because it was not allowing air circulation to flow as much. But still, the bamboo was strong enough in order to keep the room way fresher than any conventional iron sheet roofing around this area. Yeah, I mean, once again, it's a learning experience, it's a trials and mistakes experience, also a growing process, a learning process towards following my intuition, and also basic knowledge that I had, because I could feel there was something wrong with the angle, and indeed that was the problem. It was not enough angle to allowing the water to run fast enough, and so it was just keep on splashing when the heavy rain was coming. But also there was another problem about the bamboo that needed to be used dried, but the Mensa used it as fresh. So as we use it as fresh, bamboo has still a lot of water inside, and as it dries, it tends to shrink. And so this created even certain gaps among one bamboo to another. So was a whole learning process that definitely gave me the teachings with a big slap with that rain. And once again, we couldn't get ourselves down. We found the solution and we kept on going. So the last phase of the house was was another dance, plastering, checking also with some Fulani community around my area, because they knew definitely much more about natural plaster and also roofing and so on. So I managed to find somebody, Zachary, not too far from here, and he shared with me some techniques. So after having tempered clay, I used a nice layer of cow dung, and then I covered everything with a layer of sand, clay, and straws. And eventually also the plastering of the house, I used a lot of sand from the nearby river, and also building the shower with rocks, with wood. So the floor was finished, the plastering of the walls was finished, the shower also was finished. Was just left with the beddings. As I was about to build them, boom, next level sickness kicks in. This time is malaria full on. And Tiam invited me again to her place in order to get treated. This time I went there on the stage where it was definitely a bit too late. And because of that, the treatment required much more attention than the previous one. And Ora actually was not around. Ora traveled, therefore was only Auntie Emma. And of course, she was having her own life with her own priorities. And her mind can go in many different places at the same time. Politics things, election were going on that time, and many people going and come and trying to interact with her and so on. So it definitely was quite heavy. I tried my best to go with herbs but this time didn't work, and I needed to be rushed to the clinic because I was literally dying. Long story short, follow up the procedure, the conventional medicine procedure that kept me alive. I mean, I still mixed it with herbs, and I believe those herbs still helped a lot. And one thing that I learned about herbs is that they are definitely efficient. They need to be considered though in more on a holistic aspect. And when I say holistic, I'm not meaning only holy as sacred, but also holistic as a whole. What type of herbs, of course, are you taking? In which mental state you are while you're taking them? In which stage the disease is while you're taking them? And especially who's giving them to you? In which environment? In which context? All of this creates the efficiency of herbs. Also, another thing that I experience is that herbs are often working as prevention and also as cure. So there's a motto that says prevention is always better than cure. Herbs should be approached more into a sort of a daily or weekly or monthly dosages that would allow one system to be kept clean and healthy and strong with the natural help of the surrounding environment. Once I got treated right there, I was dismissed after a few days. I came back alone in the land as I was recovering, which was quite of a rough recovery. I remember walking was so hard, breathing was hard. Everything was just lack of energy. And as I was taking the conventional medicine, I was also mixing with herbal medicine, but especially the quietness and the harmony of the land surely helped me into recovering 100%. As I was recovering, it took quite a while. I still needed to finish the house with interiors and so on. And so I called the carpenter that was having the job of putting up together a few beds and a few last things that needed to be done. I gave him the money in order to go and get the wood that was needed in order to build those particular furnitures and so on. He started the job very nicely. Halfway, the wood was not there. And I said, oh, what's happened to the other wood that you needed to buy? And turns out that he just chopped the money. He used the money in order to buy another thing that he wanted to have for himself. And so going through that challenge, trying to solve that obstacle while I was recovering from malaria, I couldn't stop myself. The show must have gone on. So I kept on working, and I needed to actually build the beddings and the furniture myself, which was very challenging. But in the meantime, because of malaria, I couldn't really rush it too much. So I went into a work mood that was very gentle and very soft, and customized also the achacha, the airway mats, in order to place them nicely. And eventually, after 6 months of full-on work, the house was finally ready. Hey, that sensation was so priceless. To go inside the rooms, so fresh, so beautiful, so cozy. And eventually there were 2 rooms. Was both functioning as my own room, but also as a guest room. So when the people would have come, they would have slept also in the same building. The shower was on point. It was a whole beautiful place. Decided to use on top of the roof a layer of grass in order to create extra insulation that helped in preserving and gaining back some of the freshness that was lost because of the fabric. To see this natural self-built home through all these challenges and interactions and learning process. It couldn't be just a house, of course. It was a home, but more than a home was a piece of art with its own entity by then. And all this time, also anti-RONA's regulation got a little bit more smoother, and the borders were opened again, meaning that the programs could take place again. By now, we are literally in January, so exactly 1 year passed since I came back in the land. And in 1 year, so much has been accomplished, and I was really much ready to share it with whoever was willing to live this beautiful, harmonious reality. And so that's what I'm gonna be showing you in the next upcoming episode. The whole sharing process that took place with other people from all over the world, and how also other people came through different programs, and how I built different structure, more efficient structure, more food, and more sustainability that came on the way. So far, stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notification, and share it. Share it with whoever you feel like. So far, I catch you later for real. Hey!